Imagine waking up in a paradise where the natural beauty is so perfect it's moving. A place where the sound of the waves lulls your heart and where the sea is more than just a backdrop, it's part of the soul of the community. Now imagine that. From one day to the next, that sea disappears. Without warning, without explanation, without leaving a single trace. Does it seem impossible? Because that's exactly what happened in Eden Shores, a charming coastal village in the United States, where the golden sand, the crystal clear waters, and the vibrant life of fishermen, artists, and dreamers simply vanished. And what was left was a deafening silence, capable of making even the most skeptical question reality. We're not talking about a fictional script. This happened. Real people lived it. The community was in shock without answers, clinging to the only thing left: hope. The newspapers called it erosion. Scientists spoke of tectonic phenomena. But among the residents, something deeper began to emerge, a spiritual connection to the mystery. Was it just a beach? Or was there something it came to teach before it left? Behind this disappearance lie lessons about understanding, emotional intelligence, respect for nature, and the true value of reconciliation between humankind and the planet. In this video, you'll delve into a true story that defies logic, provokes the soul, and can transform the way you see the world. It's not just about the disappearance of a beach. It's about what happens when everything you love is ripped away without explanation, and yet you find the courage, compassion, and humanity to start over. Prepare yourself for a journey of inspiration, mystery, and revelation. But beware. After hearing this story, you may never look at the sea the same way again. Once upon a time, nestled among the golden curves of the American coastline, lay a beach of such breathtaking beauty that many called it a little slice of heaven. The residents of the small coastal town of Eden Shores, where time seemed to slow down, lived in harmony with nature, celebrating the gift of living there. The sand, fine as flour and white as a summer cloud, was shaped daily by the crystal clear sea that lovingly kissed the shore. All around, native vegetation pulsated with colors and aromas, while sea turtles, pelicans, and dolphins danced a breathtaking natural ballet. That stretch of land was more than a postcard setting. It was a symbol of hope, affection, and a profound connection with humanity itself. The beach was not just a geographic space. It was a living organism pulsating with kindness, where the residents' emotional intelligence intertwined with the rhythm of the tide. Entire generations had built stories there, anchored in understanding, perseverance, and respect for every grain of sand and every living being. There, every morning, a silent ritual took place. Fishermen like Mike cast their nets with faith and initiative. Children chased crabs with unbridled laughter. And couples like Eleanor and Charlie sat under the coconut trees to contemplate the sunrise, spectacle of colors that touched the soul with inspiration. The beach also provided sustenance, from tropical fruit juice stalls to Mrs. Grace's seafood restaurant, whose sincerity and hospitality transformed tourists into friends. Commerce flourished based on trust and collaboration. It was common to see young people helping their elders without expecting anything in return, simply through the simple power of kindness. Community events, such as cleanup drives and cultural festivals, strengthened bonds and the collective wisdom that lived in every heart. Life there was a constant exercise in altruism and overcoming difficulties, even in the most difficult seasons. It was in this delicate balance between tradition and innovation that the beach thrived, serving as the beating heart of that resilient and grateful community. And how could we forget Mr. Thomas, an elderly marine biologist who walked every afternoon with his worn notebook, recording the changes of the sea? He said the beach had taught him more about love and humility than any university could. "Here, we learn from seagulls and storms," he would say perceptively. He often recounted that every detail, from the sound of the waves to the brightness of the stars, was a form of silent communication from the earth, To those who still knew how to listen with their hearts, it wasn't just a landscape. It was a temple of empathy, a place where solitude lost its strength in the face of the communion between human beings and nature. Therefore, it was not uncommon for people from far away to move there in search of healing, inner reconciliation, and purpose. There, visitors rediscovered the value of gratitude and the courage to face their deepest fears. But what no one imagined was that, overnight, this paradise so full of life and compassion was about to mysteriously fall silent. On that eerily silent morning, the sea seemed to have receded with an unnatural timidity. The sky, though clear, exuded an invisible unease. That's when Laura, the owner of a small natural smoothie stand, realized something was out of place. Where there had once been dancing waves, there were now only exposed rocks and a strip of wet sand expanding illogically. Within hours, the first rumors began to spread through the town like wind in a dry forest. "The beach is disappearing," they whispered. Mike, the fisherman, recounted with moist eyes that when he cast his net that day, it fell onto dry ground, where the sea used to breathe. The feeling was of collective loneliness, as if something sacred was being ripped from the community. The disappearance was gradual but relentless. There was no sound of a storm, no trace of typical erosion. Only a constant sense of loss, fear, and incomprehension. And amidst the bewilderment and the attempt to keep hope alive, deep feelings of empathy emerged among neighbors, some supporting each other with affection and resilience. Most impactful, however, were the testimonies of those who lived by the sea. Eleanor, visibly shaken, told the local press that she heard a subtle noise, like a sigh coming from the depths. Charlie, her husband, described the scene as if the world were slowly emptying through an invisible crack in the horizon. Cell phone cameras captured videos that seemed fictional, the sea receding without a tidal wave, trees drying up in hours, birds suddenly migrating inland. Social media exploded. News spread like wildfire. Major television channels arrived the same day, trying to extract answers from scientists, geologists, and local authorities. But there was no plausible explanation. What was seen on the screens was a wounded community, trying to maintain its courage in the face of the inexplicable. And it was in this chaos that true mutual understanding emerged. Young people helped the elderly move. Strangers welcomed strangers. It was the power of kindness manifesting itself, as if tragedy revealed the best and most human in each person. And while on the one hand there was generosity, on the other, the buzz of speculation grew. Theories ranged from global warming to secret government experiments. Some spoke of tectonic shifts, others of an energy imbalance on Earth. "Something is wrong with the planet," said Thomas, the biologist, now with a lost gaze, recording not beauty but decay. Children wept as they watched their sandcastles being swallowed by the void, and the elders, with their suffering wisdom, simply watched in silence, carrying the pain as one carries a mourning burden. There was fear, there was insecurity, but there was also courage, the courage to face the unknown with intelligence, initiative, and hope. The beach, once a symbol of stability, now became the epicenter of a mysterious phenomenon. And as reporters stumbled over sensationalist images, there in the heart of Eden Shores, in the simple homes and restless hearts, something deeper was being lost, the symbolic ground of trust. But there were still too many questions and too few clues. As Eden Shores struggled to cope with the emotional and economic collapse looming on the horizon, experts began arriving in waves, from universities, institutes, and government agencies. They included geologists, oceanographers, climatologists, and even environmental engineers, each with their own hypotheses, each with their own technical jargon, trying to translate what residents were experiencing into data. The first explanation suggested was accelerated coastal erosion, a common phenomenon but rarely so sudden. Dr. Rachel Simmons' team at NOAA collected sediment samples and measured the sea's advance with high-precision drones. But the patterns were off. It wasn't just the coastline crumbling, but the ocean floor sinking. Climate change was also suggested as a cause, reinforced by rising ocean temperatures and abnormal tidal shifts. For many there, it was the first time they had heard terms like continental shelf collapse or seismic upwelling. And even without understanding everything, people listened with respect, trusting that the intelligence of those scholars could reveal some solution, some spark of hope amidst the doubt. Dr. Simmons, with her firm yet welcoming voice, gave a press interview that made waves throughout the city. She explained that a sudden tectonic shift could have altered the pressure in the subterranean layers, causing a subsidence imperceptible to the naked eye but catastrophic in its consequences. It's as if the ground is being sucked in on itself, she said, pointing to a three-dimensional projection of the coastal terrain. Dr. Leonard Hayes, a seismologist at Caltech, brought an intriguing counterpoint. There were unusual patterns of electromagnetic activity in the region. We're facing something outside the conventional geological pattern, he stated. The scientific investigation became a true adventure of brilliant minds in search of the truth. The previously paralyzed population began to participate in meetings, to ask questions, to seek understanding. It was a way to regain a sense of control, to exercise emotional intelligence in the face of adversity. And even though responses were slow, there was something comforting in the collective effort for truth, an invisible force of collaboration and resilience between science and community. As the days passed, Eden Shores became the stage for intense debates and visits from major media outlets. Reporters interviewed the scientists, but also the residents, who now mastered technical terms with surprising ease. It was common to hear a teenager talking about tectonic plates, or an elderly woman explaining the difference between coastal erosion and subsidence. This exchange of knowledge brought previously distant worlds closer together, connecting academic knowledge with popular wisdom. The most interesting thing was seeing how the initial fear gave way to the initiative. Volunteers began mapping disappearing spots with their own drones. Fishermen began recording water data with equipment loaned from universities. And inspired children drew pictures and made stories about the hidden beach, as they called it. It was a living movement of overcoming and innovation, where pain was transformed into learning. Still without definitive answers, Eden Shores now walked with courage and compassion among difficult questions. And among these questions, one in particular began to bother even the most skeptical. What if what was happening was something beyond science? The beach's disappearance wasn't just a geological tragedy, it was a direct blow to the economic and emotional heart of Eden Shores. The once vibrant stalls, where entire families made a living from crafts, selling home-cooked food and enjoying authentic tourist experiences, were now shuttered, covered with tarps that resembled mourning sheets. Mrs. Grace, the owner of the beachfront restaurant, wept as she looked at the empty tables and the former veranda where tourists took photos with the sunset in the background. It's not just the beach that's gone, she said. It's our livelihood, our purpose, our connection to the world. Tourism, the town's lifeblood, collapsed in a matter of days. Reservations were canceled en masse, hotels emptied, and travel agencies closed their doors. What had once been a lively stream of activity now echoed with a disconcerting silence. The material loss was palpable, but the greater pain was that of a wounded identity. It was as if the sense of belonging had been swallowed up along with the sand. And even amid financial insecurity, residents supported one another with empathy, courage, and the power of kindness beyond the human impact. Experts began to notice a silent but devastating environmental collapse. Without the beach to filter sediment and serve as a breeding ground for diverse species, sea turtles disappeared. Reefs became more fragile, and coastal wildlife shifted in search of balance. The delicately balanced ecosystem now faced severe imbalance. Dr. Thomas, now volunteering with biologists at the University of Florida, reported that species that had taken decades to adapt were migrating or simply disappearing. Biodiversity was becoming a memory. Every animal that disappears, he said, is a reminder that there is no separation between nature and us. We are part of the same cycle. Children, once accustomed to watching dolphins from their balconies, now saw only gray water. The sense of ecological loss awakened a dormant consciousness in many. Environmental understanding grew, and residents joined forces in reforestation and coastal protection efforts. There was suffering, yes, but also initiative, generosity, and reconciliation with the planet. Charlie, who had worked for years as an eco-kayak guide, now spent his days teaching science to children in the community shed. He transformed his pain into inspiration, teaching about the importance of mangroves, tides, and ecosystem resilience. Eleanor, for her part, organized mental health discussion groups where residents could express their anguish and seek emotional support amid the storm of uncertainty. The beach was gone, but the community's humanity flourished as never before. Many faced the fear of financial collapse, loneliness, and the loss of what they knew as home. But there was something that endured, the confidence that together they would find a way out. The crisis revealed spontaneous leadership, solidarity, projects, and creative solutions. What Eden Shores was experiencing was more than a tragedy, it was a journey. And, like every crossing, it carried questions that still had no answers. Because, even though science explained part of the situation, there were too many details, strange coincidences, and a growing feeling that there was something even deeper behind it all. As the weeks passed, the beach's disappearance ceased to be merely a local catastrophe and began to occupy a peculiar space in the collective imagination. Questions, once posed in desperation, now circulated with an almost mystical layer of mystery. What really happened to Eden Shores Beach? Was it just another natural phenomenon, one that science is still in its infancy trying to explain? Or was there something beyond something that defies our logic, our conventional intelligence? Experts continued to investigate, but the truth remained as slippery as dry sand between fingers. Some pointed to unstable magnetic fields, others to gravitational sinkholes caused by extremely rare underground events. But there were also those like Dr. Leonard, who ventured to whisper that perhaps there were forces that science still dares not name. For the residents, it all sounded like the revelation of a parallel universe of doubts and possibilities. The prevailing feeling now was the understanding that not everything can be controlled, and that the true challenge was to live with the unknown, with courage, humility, and faith. Mystery enveloped the town like an invisible fog. Conversations in cafes, community meetings, and even schools revolved around the same question: would the beach ever return? Or had it been taken by something we would never fully understand? A group of residents, led by Eleanor, began documenting all the unexplained stories. Charlie created a mural in the central square, where anyone could leave a theory, a drawing, a dream, or a memory of the beach. There was something magical about this exchange, as if the town were collectively creating a new way of coping with loss. One child wrote that the beach had been taken to rest and be reborn in another place where it also needs beauty. And no one dared laugh. Hope, however fragile, was the one thing no one could take away. The community became increasingly united by compassion, empathy, and the generosity of listening to others without judgment. It was as if this enigma awakened in people a new form of humanity, where emotional intelligence was as valuable as technical knowledge. Between scientific theories and fantastical guesses, a new feeling began to take root, that there was a hidden purpose to this disappearance. Perhaps the beach, with its ancient energy and symbolic connection to life, had been taken to protect something or someone. Some older women in town said they felt the beach's presence in their dreams. They heard the waves, smelled the salt, felt the warmth of the sand. Mr. Thomas, ever the skeptic, began to admit that certain behavioral patterns in the local fauna were strangely coordinated. as if guided by an unseen intelligence. No one knew for sure what this meant, but everyone sensed something larger was at play. The town, once steeped in solitude, now became a center of inspiration. Outsiders came not to see the beach, but to understand what had happened there. And that was what kept the flame of perseverance alive in Eden Shores, the certainty that there was a story still being written, an answer yet to be discovered, something that connected every human being in that town to a mystery greater than they could imagine. Faced with the growing impasse in community mobilization, the state government decided to launch an official investigation, bringing together a task force comprised of environmental agencies, universities, and law enforcement agencies. A small command center was set up in the former high school, now transformed into a makeshift intelligence and analysis headquarters. Technicians installed soil sensors, ocean buoys, monitoring satellites, and mobile weather stations. The city became an open-air laboratory. Despite the strict protocols, the population observed everything with a mixture of distrust and hope. Many saw only bureaucracy and slowness in the officials, while others believed that a solution would finally be found. Some said this was the last chance to uncover the truth. Communication between agents and residents, however, began to reveal something rare, an exchange of respect and collaboration. The exchange of information between scientists and popular accounts strengthened the investigation. For the first time, academic intelligence and popular wisdom worked side by side. The community, even shaken, felt useful and valued. And this sense of shared purpose rekindled trust, as if everyone were in the same boat adrift, but together. Ryan Miller, from the state's Geosciences Division, became the most visible figure in the investigation. Young but with a calm demeanor, he quickly won the affection of residents with his direct and human manner. "You're not data, you're people," he said during one of the public meetings with a sincerity that brought tears to many. Eleanor and Charlie began collaborating directly with him, handing over records, homemade maps, and even accounts that previously seemed like mere folklore. Ryan, with sharp emotional intelligence, realized that the clues lay not only in the charts, but also in the stories. He requested access to the town's old archives, the oral histories of elders, and even letters from deceased fishermen. Everything was relevant. This approach instilled in residents a sense of agency and belonging. Volunteer groups formed to review historical documents, while younger residents built online databases with shared information. Such unity between generations had never been seen. The power of kindness, driven by the search for answers, fueled an invisible force that kept Eden Shores standing. However, as the data was cross-referenced, strange patterns began to emerge. Seismic readings that fluctuated without known cause, changes in the air composition at certain points along the coast, magnetic interference with no defined origin. Dr. Leonard Hayes himself, both experienced and skeptical, admitted that we are facing a type of phenomenon that escapes traditional models. This launched the investigation in a new direction, the possibility of multiple factors interacting in complex and unprecedented ways. Or, as Thomas once put it somewhat ironically, perhaps it's the Earth trying to teach us something. The meetings became more intense, the debates more profound, and the search for solutions more urgent. But it wasn't just about restoring the beach, it was about understanding what it meant. The community had already experienced pain, loss, fear, but also reconciliation, transformation, and overcoming. And deep down, everyone knew the final answer might not come from an equation or a technical report, but rather from the combination of everything they had experienced together, with love, compassion, wisdom, and an unshakable faith in the mystery of life. As scientific explanations encountered their limitations, a new kind of narrative began to gain traction in Eden Shores' extraordinary theories. These weren't just the delusions of desperate people, but emotional and cultural constructs that attempted to fill the void left by logic. Some residents began to believe the beach had been taken by a supernatural force, like a punishment from nature or a kind of spiritual cleansing. Others said it had simply fulfilled its cycle, like a living entity that had decided to depart. Groups began to gather on full moon nights, lighting candles at the edge of the cliff where the sand used to stretch, in respectful silence, connecting with something greater. The reverence mixed with fear was palpable. There was no hysteria, but rather a profound humility in the face of the inexplicable. Interestingly, this emerging spirituality didn't divide the community. On the contrary, it fostered even greater empathy among residents. It was as if everyone, believers and skeptics alike, knew that full understanding required more than science. It required faith, insight, and wisdom. With the case's notoriety, alternative scholars began visiting the town. One of them was retired Professor Arthur Blake, author of books on dimensional portals and Earth's energy. In an interview with local radio, he suggested that Eden Shores might be located at a rare energetic intersection, a sort of transition zone between planes. Perhaps the beach hasn't disappeared, but merely changed frequency, he declared, leaving part of the audience silent and another completely captivated. His speech, though shrouded in esoteric terminology, carried a message of hope that resonated in many hearts. After all, if there was a possibility of reunion, even if metaphysical, that was enough to keep the flame of trust alive. Some teenagers began producing videos on the subject, mixing fiction and documentary, and sharing them on social media. This wave of creativity spawned a new way of coping with grief, through art, imagination, and inspiration. And while theorists debated, ordinary people found in myths a way to reconstruct their own narratives. The most talked about idea arose when an elderly woman named Margaret, born and raised in Eden Shores, revealed an old diary belonging to her grandmother, which described an enchanted tide that had occurred over 100 years ago, causing part of the coast to dissolve before human eyes. The discovery ignited debate. Local historians searched for records, maps, legends, and anything that could confirm the event. The line between reality and myth became increasingly blurred. And yet, no one seemed to care about defining what was real or fantasy. What mattered most was the effect. The town rediscovered its past, its cultural heritage, its forgotten symbols. This brought about a new kind of reconciliation, not with the beach itself, but with the community's very identity. Now Eden Shores was also a place of mysticism, of questioning, of overcoming linear thinking. It was as if the pain had opened space for something deeper, the ability to imagine, to dream, to accept that not everything needs to be explained, to be lived with love, respect, and compassion. And amidst all this, new signs began to emerge. Shortly after the extraordinary theories began to spread more widely, something even more intriguing began to occur in Eden Shores. Small signs, almost imperceptible at first, began to challenge even the most skeptical. In the early hours of the morning, residents reported hearing sounds similar to the crashing of waves, even miles from the former shoreline. Objects that had been lost, toys, necklaces, tools, began to mysteriously appear on porches or in gardens, clean, intact, as if the sea had discreetly returned them. Trees near the former shore began to bloom out of season, attracting birds never before seen in the area. Dr. Thomas cautiously said it could simply be a natural rearrangement. But even he hesitated when trying to explain why dolphins began swimming upriver, crossing areas they had never before entered. Animal behavior had changed, as had the air. There was a feeling in the air, hard to name, somewhere between affection and alertness. The town quietly began to realize that the mystery was not over. In fact, it seemed to be merely changing shape. Eleanor was the first to capture on video a phenomenon that has garnered thousands of views. A light mist spiraling around an ancient wooden sculpture in the central square. The video showed not only the mist but also a soft sound, similar to a whisper or a distant melody, which sent a strange shiver down the spine of viewers. It was as if the beach was trying to communicate, she said in a moving interview. Charlie, for his part, recounted an equally intriguing event. While walking with a group of volunteers near the cliff, he found fresh seabird footprints identical to those of the pelicans that had disappeared, but with no pelicans in sight. The mystery was beginning to expand, no longer as a threat, but as something that provoked a profound understanding of the limits of logic and the vastness of the unseen. Residents, previously paralyzed by fear, now walked with greater emotional intelligence and acceptance. The power of kindness grew in the silence. Neighbors tended each other's gardens, left positive notes on park benches, and made mystery a link of connection and generosity. However, not all signs brought comfort. Some families reported recurring dreams of the beach, but in these dreams, the water appeared dark and thick, as if carrying a forgotten memory. Children began drawing landscapes that blended sky, land, and sea in circular shapes, like whirlpools. The art teacher, while setting up an exhibition of these drawings, noticed that almost all of them had the same symbol in the bottom corner, a spiral, created intuitively as if a collective signature of something greater. The local Reverend, Pastor Reed, began addressing the theme in his sermons, suggesting that God also speaks through mystery. The city began to breathe the enigma as part of its daily routine. It was no longer a matter of rediscovering the beach, but of learning from its absence. And paradoxically, this absence began to fill hearts with hope, inspiration, and wisdom. There were still questions. There was still uncertainty. But now there was also a certainty that Eden Shores had been chosen not to suffer, but perhaps to reveal something the world wasn't yet ready to understand. And that revelation seemed ever closer. And then, as if drawn by a silent call, people began to return. First came the children of Eden Shores who had left decades ago, seeking a future in the big cities. Then came the longtime tourists, those in love with the beach that, even though gone, remained alive in their memories. What moved these people wasn't just longing, it was an inexplicable force, something between nostalgia and compassion. Many said they felt a tightness in their chest when they saw the news, as if the beach's disappearance had touched something intimate, ancestral. Sarah, a nurse from New York, quit her night shift at the hospital and caught the first plane. Upon arriving, she wept before the emptiness where waves had once formed. "It doesn't matter if the beach is here or not. This place is my home," she said. And this feeling, shared by so many, began to move not only the streets, but hearts. The city began to pulse differently. There were more voices, more hands, more affection. The return of those who believed was the breath of life Eden Shores didn't know it needed. With the reunions came stories, long hugs, laughter through tears, and memories recovered like treasures. People who had previously been separated by old hurts now met in the middle of the square, and instead of harsh words, they exchanged forgiveness. It was as if the disappearance of the beach had also washed away pride, vanity, and haste. In their place, a new kind of relationship emerged. More sincere, more human. There was a restorative force in each reunion. The cafes filled not with customers, but with conversations. The old event hall reopened, now a center for community sharing. Eleanor organized a night of stories about the city, where everyone shared what they remembered of the beach, its smell, its color, the sound of the waves. And there, between simple words and emotional glances, the city found reconciliation. The mystery, which had previously generated fear and loneliness, now inspired unity. Understanding grew, and with it the certainty that Eden Shores would never be the same, and that perhaps that wasn't a bad thing. Those who returned came not just to see, but to rebuild. Old houses were renovated. Community gardens sprang up on abandoned lots. Children played ball in fields where before there had been only silence. The city was reborn, not by magic, but by a force that can only arise from generosity and collective emotional intelligence. Many arrived with new ideas, new technologies, innovation, and sustainability projects. Some brought experiences from outside and adapted them to the city's context, promoting practical and effective solutions. Others, like Charlie, simply offered their arms and ears. But all, without exception, came guided by the same purpose: to give back what Eden Shores had once given them. And even without the beach, there was now a new kind of beauty, that of the union between past, present, and future. A city that lost a physical symbol, but gained an even stronger identity, one of hope, courage, perseverance, and genuine love. And as the stars shone brightly once again in the city's nights, a question lingered: what if the beach, somehow, was also waiting for this moment? Over time, Eden Shores learned to breathe differently. The absence of the beach, which once stung like an open wound, began to be understood as a space of transformation. The place where the sea touched the sand was now a silent clearing, surrounded by trails the residents themselves created, with benches carved from local wood and plaques bearing phrases left by children, poets, and anonymous people. There, on the ancient boundary between land and sea, a shrine of memory was born, where each visitor left a stone painted with words like perseverance, love, or gratitude. It was not a monument to loss, but to understanding. The town had changed profoundly, irreversibly, beautifully. Now tourism was experiential. People came from all over the country to hear the stories, feel the energy, and learn from the wisdom of the residents. What was once a seaside resort became a symbol of resilient humanity. The transformation was clear in everyone's eyes: less rush, more presence; less consumption, more collaboration. Pain had become a lesson. Absence, inspiration. Eleanor and Charlie, now closer than ever, opened a small community center called The Shore Within, where they hosted conversation circles, permaculture, workshops, meditation sessions, and social projects focused on emotional health. The beach is gone, but it left its essence within us, Charlie would say with a smile that blended melancholy and hope. The place soon became a meeting place where people came not to heal their pain, but to transform it into initiative. Young people who had previously considered leaving now led environmental innovation projects. Elderly people taught children the value of small things: watering a plant, listening to a story, helping a neighbor. The town began to live by the rhythm of the heart. There was less external noise and more emotional intelligence. A new economy was emerging based on exchange, solidarity, and sustainability. Eden Shores was no longer a destination, it was a reference. A reminder that even fear and insecurity, when embraced with empathy and courage, can take us to deeper places. Thomas, now retired, sat every morning on the cliff where the beach used to shine. With his old notebook on his lap, he still took notes, no longer about ocean currents or migratory species, but about human behavior. He noted gestures: a child offering her snack to a stranger, a teenager reading to an elderly person, a lingering embrace between two old friends reconciled. The new biodiversity is in the way we care for each other, he said. Because Eden Shores had awakened to what many take a lifetime to realize: true paradise is not made only of landscapes, but of relationships. And although the beach never returned, it left an invisible legacy that shaped every decision, every look, every breath. It was the power of kindness manifesting itself, constantly, silently, irreversibly. And so, even without a definitive conclusion, the city continued steady, alive, more human than ever. After all, who said the end of the sand would be the end of the story? And now that you know the beating heart of this story, tell me, how many beaches have disappeared from your life without explanation? How many moments, people, spaces, or dreams simply vanished, and you were left there, standing there, trying to understand what happened? Perhaps the true mystery lies not in What's gone, but in what remains even after the loss? What have you done with the void that remains? The Eden Shores community has shown us that the most important thing isn't to understand everything. It's to live with wisdom, empathy, and courage even when there are no answers. But this story also carries a warning that cannot be ignored. The planet is giving us signs. Ecological collapse doesn't begin with earthquakes or disappearing tides. It begins with daily neglect, with indifference to the trash we throw, the forest we let burn, the life we pretend not to see. What are we doing today that could cost someone tomorrow? What kind of legacy are we leaving? The world doesn't need perfect heroes, but conscious people with the initiative and courage to take their part in the change. How about applying this to your own journey? What is disappearing from your life and from our earth that you can protect, restore, and care for? How can you transform loss into resilience, loneliness into affection, fear into action? Every choice you make is a seed. Every action an impact. And the future depends precisely on this. How you choose to live today. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a reminder of the power of kindness. And if you want to continue discovering real stories that inspire, move, and awaken the best version of you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Together, we will build a community that transforms pain into purpose and mystery into wisdom. Your legacy begins now.